All right, so Katrina, I just accidentally, somebody was trying to get in and I accidentally hit deny. So they may try to be getting back in. Anyway, so thank you all for joining us this evening and welcome to the second webinar this month in our Prescribed Burn Land Managers Toolbox workshop series. So last week we went over why we burn in Arkansas. And today we're going to be talking about prescribed burn associations and how to get those started. But first, I'll start with some quick introductions. So my name is Jessica Cox. I'm a Farm Bill biologist with Quail Forever in the west central part of the state, and I'm based out of the NRCS office in Paris, Arkansas. And joining us this evening is Katrina Sims, who's also a Quail Forever Farm Bill biologist, and she is based out of the NRCS office in Harrison. So again, this month we focused on prescribed fire here in Arkansas, and we're going to be wrapping up this month's discussions with talking about prescribed burn associations. And I'd like to take a couple of minutes just to briefly review prescribed fire before we jump into prescribed burn associations and why it's an important tool. So if you missed last week's webinar, just to give you a little back history of prescribed fire in Arkansas, or you can always go to our Quail Forever in Arkansas YouTube page and watch that video that was recorded of that webinar a couple of weeks ago. So with that, I'm going to turn my camera off so that it doesn't have issues with the connectivity. All right. So again, like I said, I'm just going to briefly go over prescribed fire in Arkansas, and this is really going to tie into that importance of establishing prescribed burn associations in the state and how these prescribed burn associations help us in ecological and wildlife habitat restoration projects. So historically, the Arkansas landscape was shaped by fire, whether this was landscape scale wildfires or those naturally occurring fires such as by lightning strikes, or even later in Arkansas history by prescribed fires that were set by Native Americans. They saw the benefits of fire across the landscape and used it extensively as a management tool. Research has shown that the majority of Arkansas would have seen a fire return interval of every 4 to 8 years, depending on your location in the state. And what this means is that fire would have occurred at landscape scales every 4 to 8 years. And when we're talking about landscape scale, we're talking about thousands of acres of Arkansas burning every 4 to 8 years. Now, there were some areas like in the Ozarks that had a little bit higher of about 10 to 12 years, but for the most part, on average across the state was 4 to 8 years. And because of these relatively frequent fire return intervals, most of our native plant species adapted with and thrived in areas where fires occurred regularly. However, since the arrival of Spanish and European settlers into Arkansas, we've seen the elimination of landscape scale fires, which makes sense because as that urban wildland interface increases, so as the state became more populated, communities expanded in size, to now we have very large populated areas, it's just not feasible to have thousands of acres burning at a time. So wildfire suppression activities began to increase. We also saw a decrease in the use of prescribed fire. So it was not completely eliminated, but it was reduced to the point that most of our state became unrecognizable by the early accounts of explorers across Arkansas. So a good example of that is Thomas Nuttall. So Thomas Nuttall was one of the first naturalists to really explore and document the flora and fauna of Arkansas. And he did this back around the 1820s. And according to his writings, much of Arkansas was vast open prairies and grasslands surrounded by savannas and open woodland. So it was a much more open landscape than what we see today. And he described a landscape that looks completely different than the one we see today. And this is because fire was still prevalent on the landscape that Nuttall described. However, as fire was removed from the landscape and as Arkansas grew and the population size began to grow, we started losing our prairies, started losing our grasslands to woody encroachment and urban sprawl. Many landscapes were converted to agricultural lands, and our native species were replaced for non-native and oftentimes invasive species. Also, our forest lands became these dense closed canopy systems that we see today, and species compositions within those forest lands have also begun to shift to contain more species that were historically controlled by fire. So we're talking about those species that, even though some may be native, eastern red cedar is probably the best example of this, but they're less fire tolerant than some of our other native species. And without fire to keep those species in check, they've been able to encroach and grow in areas where we just historically would not have found them. So this kind of brings us to why we need fire and a lot more of it on our landscape if we're wanting to achieve those successful restoration efforts. And to be successful, landscape scale changes are needed. And again, those landscape scale changes are, where we're impacting thousands of acres. And if we look at land ownership for the nearly 34 million acres of land in Arkansas, as you can see from this graph on the screen, nearly 90% of all land in Arkansas is privately owned. And this is important because this means that we have to rely on private landowners to join us in those restoration efforts if we're really wanting to make a significant impact. And although these conservation agencies, so Quail Forever, the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, the Forestry Commission, all of these conservation agencies are diligently working on restoration efforts on public lands, we lack the manpower and access to really achieve our goals, which is that landscape scale restoration. And that's where PBAs come in. So by working with landowners, we can burn more acres, which means we can get closer to achieving those large scale restoration efforts that we need in order to protect and conserve our wildlife and other natural resources here in Arkansas. So now we'll jump into prescribed burn associations. During this presentation, we're going to be discussing what PBAs are, how to get a PBA started in your area if there's not already one, and then we're going to briefly go through some PBA updates from existing PBAs as well as PBAs that are in the works of being created. So we'll start with what is a PBA. So a PBA is a prescribed burn association, and I'll refer to them as PBA throughout the rest of this presentation because it's much shorter to say. But essentially it's a group of landowners that form partnerships that pool their knowledge, equipment, and other resources to conduct prescribed burns on private lands. So these individuals work together as a team to help each other burn their properties. So it's essentially landowners helping landowners conduct prescribed burns. Individuals in the PBA may have varying levels of knowledge and experience with prescribed fire. So we've had folks who have never burned anything, didn't even know what a drip torch was, joining PBAs, to more experienced individuals. So we've had folks from different conservation organizations join PBAs, and we've even had landowners that have experience with either wildland fire or even structural fires joining these PBAs. So this means that really anyone can join and participate in a PBA as long as the bylaws, which we'll discuss in more detail shortly, are being followed. So when looking at the need for more prescribed fire, obviously we have to look at what the limiting factors are for achieving those goals. So for prescribed fire, the three biggest limiting factors for private landowners that we found were knowledge, so how to safely conduct a prescribed burn, manpower, having enough hands on deck to conduct a prescribed burn, and equipment. So that could be drip torches, water tanks, hand tools, PPE, all of that stuff. So those were the biggest limiting factors in landowners actually burning their properties. So as far as knowledge goes, while PBAs are landowner-driven associations, partnerships between conservation agencies and PBAs can definitely help get PBAs off on the right foot by filling in some of those missing gaps in that knowledge section. So this can be through trainings provided by the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission and Quail Forever. I know we often partner together to do Learn to Burn 1 and Learn to Burn 2 classes for folks. And we've also recently been able to get a few limited seats available for folks in prescribed burn associations to go through Burn Boss School to become a certified burn boss. So obviously we can't get every single member of the PBA, but oftentimes a PBA might send a representative, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to get those seats available for PBAs here in Arkansas. Also, we're often available to assist prescribed burn associations with their burns when time allows, especially in those early stages of a prescribed burn association starting, where they may not have all of the equipment they need yet, or they may not have the amount of people they need. We're often available to help out with those prescribed burns, especially in the early years. Biologists often act as advisors on these PBAs. While we don't usually hold any official roles within the association, we can often help by writing and reviewing burn plans, checking fire breaks, and then providing those additional trainings when they're needed for folks. Also, going back to finding and recruiting landowners that already have a little bit of knowledge with prescribed burning and or experience with prescribed fire can be very beneficial in helping to fill those knowledge gaps as well. So as I mentioned earlier, these folks can act as advisors to the PBA and can help to provide training to members as well. Since the agency folks, we're a little bit limited in number and we're kind of scattered across the state. So if you can find folks that have some experience with prescribed fire, that can be a great advantage to that PBA. Looking at manpower, so while the number of people needed to conduct a prescribed burn varies depending on several factors, so the size of the burn, the experience of the crew, etc., having access to members of the PBA who can assist on a burn definitely allows landowners to not only burn larger or more complex units, but it also increases the safety of the burn and reduces the chance for an escaped fire. And as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes agency folks are willing to provide extra hands on deck if we're needed. Another way that we can help to mitigate the equipment limiting factor is, so PBAs generally charge an annual membership fee, which we'll discuss in a little bit more detail later. Having adequate funds up front to purchase equipment is often an issue. So this equipment can oftentimes be pretty expensive, and it's stuff that most landowners don't just have access to on hand. So to help PBAs get off to a good start, Quail Forever, the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service have partnered together to provide equipment trailers for PBAs in Arkansas. So these equipment trailers are essentially on long-term lease to the PBAs, meaning that we're not going to charge you for the trailer or the equipment, but the equipment is still technically owned by the agencies. It's just on that long-term loan to the Prescribed Burn Association. These trailers include PPE, which is personal protective equipment, drip torches, hand tools, water tanks, pretty much everything you need to conduct a prescribed fire can be found in these, as far as equipment goes, can be found in these trailers. And you also get the trailer as well. And then as PBAs get more money in their accounts through memberships and donations, they can add more equipment, which if the PBA purchases the equipment, that equipment will be owned, but they can add more equipment and store it in those trailers as they grow. And these trailers are available for any member of a prescribed burn association to use, and that's going to be according to the bylaws. So just looking real quick, here's a few pictures of some Learn to Burn classes that we have helped to put on. There is a picture of one of the prescribed burn trailers with the equipment that will be provided to the PBA. So this one, it has some backpack blowers, some signs that you can use to put out on the road when you're conducting a prescribed burn. So essentially, like I said, everything you would need to conduct a prescribed burn would be found in this trailer. So now that you kind of have hopefully a better understanding of what a PBA is, let's now take a look at how these associations are kind of organized. And as I mentioned earlier, the most important thing about these is PBAs are landowner led. So these are not agency organizations, and while we're there to assist and provide any advice that we can, the decisions are really coming down to the members of the PBA. But they can be broken down, how I have it broken down is into 3 sections. So the first section is a group of elected board officials. So this board is typically made up of a president, a vice president, a treasurer, and a secretary. Those are the 4 main official roles of the board. Each position has its own duties as assigned, and that may change according to the Prescribed Burn Association and what they would like each position to do. So it's very these are very flexible groups. The second group are just general members of the PBA. So these general members typically consist of landowners who wish to have access to PBA personnel and equipment to use on their own properties, and even volunteers. So volunteers for a PBA might be folks that they don't necessarily have any land that they're looking to get burned, but they're just interested in learning more and volunteering to assist the PBA with burns. And then lastly, we have the advisors. So those can be, again, those may be members that you have that have a little bit of experience with prescribed fire, maybe a lot of experience with prescribed fire, or agency staff. And again, so those agency staff are there to help when needed to fill those gaps. So while we're a part of the PBA, we're not really any of the ones making decisions or doing anything like that. We're just there, as the thing says, more as in an advisory role. So the next look at in the organization of a prescribed burn association are going to be the bylaws. So each prescribed burn association is responsible for creating and maintaining a set of bylaws. Bylaws are essentially a set of rules that are established by the PBA that are created to regulate the PBA. So it's really just like a list of rules. Like I said, while each PBA creates and maintains their own individual bylaws, those bylaws generally contain a lot of the same information. So that could be general information, such as the purpose of the Prescribed Burn Association, the name, so whatever you're choosing to name your PBA, and the scope and locations of essentially your work area. So usually in the case of PBAs, it's what counties is this PBA going to cover? Then there's officer information. So that information is going to go into what positions are required and what are those positions' responsibilities going to be. It'll also list how board officials are going to be selected and how often, so how long those terms last. Next, you'll look at membership requirements. So these are the requirements that you are going to have in order for somebody to be able to be eligible to use the burn equipment and have access to PBA members. And Most of the time, again, this is all up for how each PBA wants to get set up, but most of the time, this is what trainings most PBAs require paid members. It's another thing, they need to have their membership paid, but they require their members to go through at least 1 to 2 trainings before they're actually eligible to have their property burned. And sometimes, and this comes into play often later after the first couple of years that the PBA is established, but as more burns are being completed, sometimes PBAs, for example, will have that landowner must participate on at least 1 prescribed burn in order to be eligible. Like I said, in the beginning, that gets kind of tricky because you're brand new, you haven't done any burns. But as the PBA grows and gets older, a lot of PBAs have enacted that rule as well. Then there's meetings. So when and how often meetings will be held is usually put into the bylaws. Generally, most PBAs have at least 1 annual meeting every year. They're going to detail prescribed burn requirements. So that's going to be trailer usage and storage, prescribed burn planning requirements, trainings and burns that are required in order to be able to utilize the PBA, such as with the membership requirements, and then liabilities and waivers. So obviously when you're dealing with prescribed burning, there's some liabilities that may come into play, and it's not the safest job out there necessarily. So oftentimes in the bylaws, we'll have a section about liabilities and waivers if any are needed. I know, for example, the North Central Prescribed Burn Association would have all of its members sign a waiver prior to helping on a prescribed burn, just saying that the Prescribed Burn Association was not liable if should anything happen. And then finances. So again, most PBAs do charge an annual membership to be an actual member of the PBA. PBAs are also able to accept donations, and then they will also need to have a bank and checking account information listed in their bylaws. And while feedback from all members is encouraged during the creation of these bylaws, the elected board officials, whoever those folks are usually the ones that are responsible for laying out and approving these bylaws. So this may be hard to see on your screen, especially if you're on a small screen like a phone, but this is an example set of bylaws from the North Central Arkansas Prescribed Burn Association. So as you can see, there's nothing fancy here. It's not a 15, 30-page document. It's a 2-page document. And as you can see, maybe from the screen, it goes over the officers and the board members. It's got them listed out. It goes through everything that's required in these bylaws. So that was the big takeaway from showing you this, is that it doesn't have to be some over-the-top legal document. I know when you say bylaws, a lot of people might get nervous about that, but yeah, no over-the-top legal document. This is a 2-page document that's really just establishing the rules by which the PBA will run. And these bylaws can be updated and amended as needed. So it's not like once you start your PBA and you make the bylaws that you have to stick with those bylaws forever. So as you learn things through your PBA, what's working, what's not working, you can always go in and amend these. And the good thing is we also have example templates for these Prescribed Burn Association bylaws that can be provided and amended as needed should a new PBA wish to use them. So essentially, this is what the North Central Arkansas Prescribed Burn Association did. We actually used the bylaws that the Central Arkansas Prescribed Burn Association came up with, and we just amended them to fit what we wanted for the North Central Arkansas Prescribed Burn Association. So it's nothing scary, but it is something that does have to be done in order to have a legitimate Prescribed Burn Association established. So how does a Prescribed Burn Association work? So you go through all the process, you get a Prescribed Burn Association set up. So how does that process look of actually getting to the prescribed burn, which is in the end of a prescribed burn association is the target goal. So it's kind of broken down again into steps. So typically step 1 is membership. Generally only members of the PBA are able to have prescribed burns conducted on their properties. And while other requirements may also be established by the PBA, generally a member is one who has paid their annual dues and has gone through the required training. So becoming a member is your first step. The next step is going to be prescribed burn planning. So if you have property that you would like the Prescribed Burn Association to come out and help you burn, and you are an up-to-date member, you're going to start your prescribed burn planning. So that's going to involve getting your prescribed burn plan completed and reviewed. Most PBAs have a review process where your plan has to be submitted and the board and advisors will look it over and essentially approve that burn plan. And then also the big one is having your fire breaks installed, having the unit ready for the prescribed burn. The next step, once you've gotten all of that taken care of, is when you are when you're ready to have your burn completed, you will contact the PBA secretary. So the PBA secretary, that's one of those board positions. They are responsible for maintaining records for all PBA members. So they will have access to the contact information for all members and volunteers for a PBA. You will get with that secretary. You will let them know all the information, such as the date that you're looking to burn, the personnel that you need. So how many people minimum are you going to need to get this burn done? And then you'll also work with them to make arrangements to get that equipment trailered. Once you've done all that, the secretary will then contact PBA members, generally through email, but the secretary will send out this information to members. And then it's member to member contact after that. So once the secretary has sent out that information, they should be instructed to contact you and in order to get any more information that they might need, or to let you know that, hey, I will be able to help you and assist you on your burn. You can put me on the list. If that person may have some equipment that they can bring to help out, you can get that from them as well. And then it would also be your responsibility as essentially the burn boss of your burn, if there are any changes that are made, or if for some reason you don't get enough folks to come out and help with your burn and you need to cancel it, you'll be responsible for making sure that those people who have contacted you to help know that the burn has been canceled, or any other important information they may need to know. Now I say usually because this is how I've seen most PBAs conduct the process. Now, again, this is a landowner association. Y'all are making the rules. You can change this up however you like, whatever best suits your needs. This is just the way we generally see prescribed burn associations, how their process typically works. So getting a PBA started. We do have several PBAs, which Katrina is going to provide those updates here shortly. But if you're interested in getting a prescribed burn association started in your area, a lot of processes in this presentation, but the first step is going to be to contact your local Quail Forever Farm Bill biologist, or your local Game and Fish Commission private lands biologist, and we will work with you to get a general interest meeting set up. So this is a public event. It's more informational, so we may go through a presentation very similar to the one that I'm giving you now. Just informational, so that people can then take that information, go back and really think about, is this something that I would like to do? Just gauging that public interest. The next step is the startup meeting. So if we get enough interest from that interest meeting, and we get enough landowners coming back and enough folks saying, hey, yeah, this is something I would like to do, we can then help you get a startup meeting scheduled. And this startup meeting, it is a public event, it's open to the public, but it's really more targeted at actual potential members. So people who have said that, hey, yes, I would like to become a member of this. Generally at the startup meetings, that's when those board officials are going to be elected, and the bylaws, we start discussing those bylaws and we actually actively work to get this PBA going. You know, you might also discuss the name of your PBA, what counties, a lot of times to determine the counties that are in the PBA. We look at the folks at the startup meeting and see what counties are represented at that meeting. And that is generally how we decide what counties will be included in that prescribed burn association. So once you have the startup meeting, everything goes well. The bylaws are put together, the bylaws are adopted, and they're reviewed and adopted by the board officials, and then they are dispersed to those general members for them to have on hand so that everybody knows what the rules are. They're definitely not this secret document that's just maintained by the board. Every member of a PBA should receive a copy of the bylaws and be able to read through it to know what's expected of them as a member. Once we go through that step, we will start on the training process. So providing those trainings, like I said, generally most PBAs have a requirement of membership is that you attend a certain number of training classes. So as I mentioned earlier, there's the Learn to Burn classes that we put on, and then also the Burn Boss School to have, you know, hopefully get at least one person in your PBA as a certified burn boss. And then we look at getting the equipment trailers. So this is all because the funding for these trailers is coming from these agencies. So far, we've been able to provide a trailer to every PBA that started in Arkansas. So as long as the funding is available, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, hopefully, the PBAs will receive these trailers in the order that they are started. So if we get 3 or 4 prescribed burn associations started around the same time, we'll go in order from when they're officially started by their bylaws, and then they will receive those trailers in that order. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get these trailers actually put together, again, because we're working with 3 different agencies to pool all of these. Sometimes it takes a little time. So, you know, I would highly encourage folks that are wanting to get a prescribed burn association started, not necessarily to wait to start burning until they get their equipment trailer. Like I said, there's agency folks that can come out that have equipment, that have the manpower to help you get some burns under your belt, get your folks out there on the fire line before you actually get your equipment trailer. So don't think you can't do any burning until you get the trailer, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get these trailers put together. But it's just good to know that those trailers full of equipment will be coming. And then the last step is burning. So getting those boots on the ground, hitting the fire line, and then just getting as many acres burned as you possibly can. There is also a PBA interest database that the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission has come up with. So this, and I'll show it to you real quick. So the PBA interest database is a place where you can go in and put in your information, what county you're in, and then we collect this. And if we get enough folks responding in a certain area, we may look at going ahead and starting one of those interest meetings. So let me see if it'll work. Oh, it pulled up on my other screen. So right here, if you go to the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission's website, so it's agfc.org, I believe, they will have a link to this database, and it's very simple. You just put in your contact information, answer a couple of questions. So again, the counties you might be interested in starting a PBA in, and then if you are interested in being just a general member, or maybe whether you might be willing to take on one of those official roles on the board, and then a place where you can go in and rate your experience with prescribed fire. So like I said, we will compile all that information, and if we get enough landowners that list in certain counties, we may go in ourselves and get an interest meeting started, and we'll be able to contact you when we do that, because we now have your contact information. So again, this is what it'll look like. I blew it up. But yeah, it's just this, it's a Google form on the Game and Fish Commission's website. And with that, I will give it over to Katrina to go over some PBA updates.
Alrighty, so for some of our updates, our Ozark Hills PBA, it has 41 members. They've done 2 burns. They got 46 acres. Our North Central, which is kind of up here in like Boone, Marion, Searcy counties, they've done quite a bit, and these are just rough estimates because we didn't get the true numbers for them. So they have a little more than 30 members. They've done over 10 burns, but we're not exactly sure how many, and they've done 200 plus acres. Then we have our Central PBA, which is kind of central, like down there towards Russellville area, a bunch of the counties around there. And we'll have a county map here in just a second where you guys can see those. And again, these are just rough numbers because we didn't get the exact numbers from them. But they've done, a little more than 10 burns or so. They've done 200 plus acres. Ozark Prairie is kind of over towards Benton, Washington counties, and I believe Madison County as well. And we didn't really even have much of an idea on their members or how many burns they've done, but they have been out and done some and have active members. And then some of our upcoming areas are Logan County, Sebastian Scott counties, and Searcy counties. Searcy County is actually still in with North Central PBA, but it was probably going to be splitting off to its own because these PBAs, roughly we want to have, like 2 to 3 counties per PBA. And some of these right now have 5 or 6 counties, and we really want to try to get smaller areas because how they work is, you're having landowners that are having to travel across all these counties to go help, somebody that wants to burn in their group. And it's a lot easier if it's only 2 or 3 counties instead of 5 or 6 counties, because you might have somebody at the far end of that area that's having to travel 2 hours to go help somebody burn. That's just a long ways to travel. So it's a lot more feasible if it's just 2 or 3 counties per PBA. Oh, sorry, went too far. So here is just the current map. The new ones, they're not quite on the map yet, but it's kind of broken down. There's also the contact information if you guys are in any of these coverage areas. You can get the contact information for those people that are the presidents. And as I said, Searcy County here, it's going to be hopefully soon having an interest meeting and starting off one. And then we have the Yale, Sebastian, Scott counties in Jessica's area. I believe her and Michelle have been working on these. They're going to be, having some interest meeting and stuff, and hopefully getting those started soon. And then hopefully we'll be able to get some started just kind of, all over the state eventually is the plan, just getting that funding and getting things going is, kind of where it all starts. So. And then where they go from here. So like for all of our existing PBAs, they have their member recruitment is really important. So I will say in some of these PBAs, we have a lot of older people that are retired, and that's all great. But it's also great if we can get more recruitment and maybe get some younger people in there, and just the more people, the more acres we can get done, further training those members. So even though we have the Learn to Burn 1 and 2 classes, and these, ones that we have started, to be great if we could just kind of rotationally, like, send a couple members or 1 member at least each year to that burn boss school to get more people, some more professional training. That way there'll be more people, that really in that PBA that really knows what's going on and can, if something is, have a spot over or something, they can know how to get out there and take care of it. Outreach and education, maybe have, outreach in their community. I know the North Central PBA, they've actually printed off a bunch of flyers they've been putting out and stuff and handing out places. And, those are just kind of interest flyers that have information. If anybody is wanting to join, they can reach out and contact them. So those are great to have. Education, that's, further, like I was saying, furthering education, sending those people out and doing that kind of stuff. And, more acres to burn. So the more people we get in these PBAs, the more acres we can burn. And as Jessica stated earlier, most of Arkansas, like 90% of Arkansas, is privately owned. So to really have a landscape-wide impact, we really need to be having more private landowners burning. And, there's only so many biologists and so many contractors that's going to go help burn. So it's really important that landowners be able to get out there and do it themselves. And, if you have neighbors helping neighbors, that's a really great way to get it done, and also low cost, because that's not really costing you hardly anything to do it, as opposed to, hiring a contractor or something like that. And also, you only have so many good burn days in a year, and those contractors, they get really backed up. So it's really good to just, if you have a good burn day and you have you and your group of, your PBA, you can go out there and burn on a good day. You don't have to wait. If you're the 10th person or 20th person in line with a contractor, they might not get you to that year. So it's really good to have those. And then for our new PBAs, kind of similar, they're going to have new member recruitment, so they're just getting off the ground. So it's really important to have those members, get as many people interested as possible, and people that are actually going to join, are interested in doing burning on their land, or even just, volunteering if they want to come out and get experience and volunteer. But you want to get a diverse group, like I was saying, like you want to get younger people, older people, people that are landowners, people that are not landowners. And we have a lot of people that, some people have large acreages, some people have small acreages. It doesn't matter, as long as you're getting involved and you're going out there and you're helping with the PBA. Focal areas where fire is needed and are already being used by landowners. So that's just those counties. A lot of these, in a lot of our counties, we have a lot of forested lands that are overgrown. They haven't been burned in several years, because fire has been removed from the landscape. So it's really great if we can get out there and start managing those areas on all this private land, and kind of, and they do that along with other land management practices. We'll start improving our habitat as a whole on a very large scale, instead of just like, our public lands are great, but they're a very small fraction of what we have in Arkansas. So we really need to be working on those private landowners and helping them get started and stuff. And as I was saying, more PBAs in the future is, where we would like to head, and try to get those ideally, 1 to 2 counties, or, per PBA. Right now, a lot of them, like I was saying earlier, are much larger than that. And so it's just, the more we, a couple counties per PBA would be ideal. And that way everybody doesn't have to travel super far. And, we can just, get more done that way, more burned acres and more good acres on the ground. And then kind of your key takeaways, as I was saying, more fire on the ground landscape, or excuse me, more fire on the Arkansas landscape, more habitat created that way, kind of setting things back to where they need to be, because, the lack of fire on the landscape over the last several years, 50, 60, 100 years, we need to get it set back to where it was, get those forests managed. And fire is a really good way to help do that, as well as our prairies. We have prairie areas, remnant prairie areas that, they're getting overgrown and stuff with woody growth. Fire is a really good way and cheap management way to help set all that stuff back. And private landowners are the key to making these landscape skills changes in Arkansas. As I was saying, 90% of Arkansas is privately owned. So really big key to that. And then, these associations, they allow landowners to help each other and get more acres burned safely. And, on top of safely, it's easy. These are people that you're going to be having meetings with. You're going to know them pretty well, by the time you've joined the PBAs and stuff. And, sometimes, it's just great to get out and, do something on your land. You're doing land improvement. You're helping your neighbor improve their land. So it's really great to get out there and join these. And these are all landowner-driven groups. So, even though that we as professionals are here to help get these started and kind of, give you the professional guidance that you need, essentially, where these are going, once everybody is kind of, joined their PBA, gotten their training, and they've, kind of got their boots on the ground and they're kind of taking off. From that point, it's landowner-driven. So it's very much, the landowners, they get in there, they say, hey, I'm going to do a burn. We need to write some burn plans, and then they get all that put together. They get their good burn days going with the weather and all that stuff, and they get out there and get it done. And then, help is always available. So if if you're wanting to join one, or if you think, your area doesn't have a PBA and you might, you're interested in maybe starting up one, or, a bunch of people will be interested, feel free to reach out to either, the Quail Forever biologist in your area, or the Arkansas Game and Fish biologist in your area. Any of us would be more than happy to help you, start one, or get you to the person that can help you get one started and get those interest meetings started and, rolling. And so with that, that's kind of the end of our PBA talk. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Yeah, so there's not a whole lot of folks on here. So, I mean, if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. I'll actually stop.
Hey, it's Cody. You said this will be available on YouTube, or where's this go after if I want to refer someone to this presentation?
Yes, so it will be uploaded to our Quail Forever in Arkansas YouTube page. And there's
Okay.
a lot of other videos on there as well. Like I said, a couple weeks ago, we did one on kind of why we're burning in Arkansas. And all of those can be found, as well as all the other videos from our Land Manager Toolbox webinar series. There's a playlist for all of those that are on there too.
Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing that. Yeah, appreciate that.
Mhm. If nobody else has any questions, we'll go ahead and let everybody get off here. Thanks for joining us tonight for this webinar. I hope you found it informative. And if you are a landowner and you think a prescribed burn association might be what your area needs, and you just maybe even just want some more information, Katrina and our contact information is was on the screen, but feel free to reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to provide you with any more information, or get one of those interest meetings set up. Normally we can arrange a venue, maybe provide some dinner for some folks, and get more fire on the ground. That's what this is all about.
Yep. Thank you guys for joining tonight.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, good job, Katrina.